Stuart Pete Turner, and this is the Flow State Podcast. This is just a short-ish overview of what we're going to be covering this season. So if you have listened before, welcome back. Thanks for rejoining me for another round of, analysis and observations on the industry. If you're joining me for the first time, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining, and hope you enjoy it. So I'm going to do my best to be, concise, which, as you will know if you've joined me before, is an ongoing challenge. But look, I'll do my best. So today, just going to run through what we are going to be covering through the rest of this year, some of the key themes, what Flow State itself is focused on, as well as what I would like from you if you'd like to join me for a conversation. So without further ado, I'm writing a series this year called the Buyer Group Intelligence Playbook. Now, if you were an account, I just want to preface this by saying, if you're an account-based marketer, or if you're in possibly a revenue operations or a growth type role, then you can potentially skip over the first few of these, although it's always good to revisit the basics, but you probably are going to be fairly familiar with this. But look, Buyer Group Intelligence, we're very focused on it in Flow State. I am incredibly laser focused on it in the new business Catalysis, which I'll be talking about a lot more very soon. And the reason for that is very simple. If you've ever read any Gartner or Forrester research, you will know that if you work in B2B, or if you're in a complex B2C business, there is a committee of people that ultimately decide whether they're going to buy you, your brand, your product, and your service. But the entire marketing and sales industry hangs on the idea that you should just be chasing an individual lead or an individual engager with your content, or at the very top end of the funnel, these aggregated audiences that are all built out of largely other people's data that you don't really have any idea of the provenance or accuracy of. So the crux of the issue, as far as I'm concerned, and not just me, like as well as other people in the industry, is that obviously is wrong. That does not set us up for success, because if we're building our entire process around, a deal that hangs off one key decision maker, we know that one key decision maker does not solely make the decision. The whole idea of a key decision maker role is a bit flawed in and of itself. So the reason I'm writing this playbook is to really dig into that issue, explain our perspective on that and why we think it's so important, as well as how we approach it through Flow State, as well as how I'm going to be approaching it through the new biz as well. So that is the world that I am in. How does this tie back to what I've covered before? Well, quite delightfully, almost as if there was some kind of plan, like a strategy almost in place. This dovetails very neatly back through the last 3 years of conversations and podcasts I have presented and been involved in, because it all comes back around to people buying from people. If you've ever read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, you'll be very familiar with the idea that you just need to get to know people and be genuine. And if you show some genuine interest and get to know people, what do you know? You can start to form relationships with those people, and they will come to like you if you're not terrible at it. And, you can go from there. So look, that's all. I mean, that theme is something we've been talking about for the past, forever, basically. But it's been a key theme all the way through the Flow State podcast. The second thing is the macro trends in particularly the digital industry are sort of contriving against us now, I would say, because a lot of the old, hero brands have lived long enough to become the villains. Amazon, Google, Meta, they're all fairly terrible now, on paper. They helped us grow some great parts of the industry, but they're kind of ruining it now. And that puts marketers and salespeople in an awkward position, because there are huge audiences locked away in those environments, but they don't really want to give them to us anymore because they want us to pay for them. So look, that's just one example. There's obviously many, many more. And we're going to be digging into those and what those mean to you in your role, because you're fighting on a number of fronts now. And I don't like to use, aggressive analogies, but look, that's where we're at. So there's that as well. And look, without getting too political or philosophical, just the other economic and social macro trends are affecting all of us, right? Like, it's taken me quite a while to get going this year, just because the general state of the world is challenging, shall we say. And you might have read the title of this episode and thought, the intelligence era, That doesn't sound accurate, Stu, is it? Is that where we're at right now? But look, I feel like we are. There's a lot of noise and, sort of what I forget the phrase, it's just general shouting going on online. But that doesn't mean that we all have to get sucked into that way of behaving, and we don't have to forget that we're all largely 99% of us quite reasonable, rational, or emotional, whatever people, and we all actually get on quite well if you just leave us alone. Um, and I think, look, like I don't want to get into a whole bring your whole self to work, like sort of that side of the conversation, because that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here is, this is stuff that you can't leave at the doorstep, because some of us work from home full time now, so you never, the doorstep is one that I just go in and out of, and it's stuff that just affects us all mentally, and that affects all the decisions that we make at work and what we bring to work. So it's important just to be aware of it. But look, I don't want to dive too much into it, because that's the subject for possibly several years worth of other conversations that are not appropriate for this forum. So look, that's why I wanted to focus on this stuff and bringing this back around. You can read the first two articles of the playbook now. We're writing it in 3 stages. So the first stage is diagnosing the issue. And look, as I said, if you're in account-based marketing or you've worked in highly targeted marketing or sales before, you may well know some or all of this stuff, but I don't think it hurts to go back over the basics. The first 3 are all diagnose. The second 2 are getting into understand and analyze, like how do we understand this problem and what are we doing about it? And then the last 2, we try and talk normally here, are how to act on the information that we're provided. What could you do? How do you get deeper into this problem? How can you be transforming your go-to-market to align around the full buying committees that are behind all these decisions, not just a lead, not an aggregated audience, not like someone downloaded a white paper. Look, we all know that we have to do these things because, people might be asking for them and we've got to demonstrate progress. But look, we're here, me, my business partner, the rest of our team are here to try and help everybody just, share their woes and just be better in their jobs and feel better about what they're doing if you need that. And if not, we're here just to probably tell you some stuff that you already know and give you some information that you can share internally to say, look, it's not just me saying this stuff. These guys say it as well. They seem like they know what they're talking about. Brilliant. So look, that's the bulk of the worky work bit of the podcast. We're going to be getting into that in a lot more detail. I'm going to be releasing the first 2 of those episodes over the coming weeks. And look, if you agree, if you disagree, if you're like, Stu, this all sounds crazy, or man, this sounds brilliant, open invitation, shoot me a message if you'd like to come on and chat about it. If you don't want to jump on and have a conversation about it, totally fine. I'd love to hear your feedback. And look, it's all really useful for me. It just helps me shape these episodes and conversations, and I'm a big fan of just hearing what people think. And as I was talking about with my very good friend Ashton on what was actually the first episode of this series, it's nice to positively disagree and just have your views challenged in a civil, sort of erudite fashion, like have a nice conversation. We don't all just have to sit around saying, yes, that's great all the time. That's really boring, isn't it? But equally, you don't have to be at each other's throats in a, one survivor is right sort of mentality every time you disagree with somebody. So look, there you go. Getting a little bit distracted there, but look, we're already at 9 minutes. That's very concise. So that's the hardcore, what are we talking about from a pure flow state industry perspective. The other thing that I wanted to do this season, and this is something else that I'm keen to get feedback on, is it struck me a little bit towards the end of the last year that the podcast was getting a little bit like, in a bit of a rut. Like there wasn't too much of the fun stuff that I was doing at the start of the year. And I feel like in these trying times, it's important to try and just, have a bit of a laugh about stuff as well. So I'm going to be gathering some amusing things from across the world of marketing and sales and just digital, and try and share those in here as well, because the one that struck me and the reason that I thought about this was I saw some very dramatic quotes about the impact of marketing from somebody. I won't name who it was, but they were being quoted like, some sort of earth-shattering, world-changing thing they were doing with their brand. And it just reminded me that everybody I've like ever met that works in marketing usually is like, oh, it's just marketing, isn't it? Or like if you work in sales, it's only sales, it's only work, isn't it? Like, yes, it's important, but we're not necessarily changing the world, are we, when we come to work and do our job? So I'm going to find a few of those amusing things and start sharing those and get back onto some industry news stuff as well, because I kind of let that drop off a little bit, but there is a lot of interesting stuff happening now that the AI wave of hype is receding somewhat and we're getting a more reasonable view of what we can actually achieve. There's a ton of like really interesting stuff happening still, particularly on the sort of meeting of software and hardware development. You've probably heard of like the the next wave of the ongoing RAM apocalypse. It was being described, people fighting for GPUs, but they're not necessarily fighting for them in the ways that you might think. So I'm going to get into a bit of that as well, and where these the worlds are colliding a little bit more, not in like a lame metaverse way, but in a much more exciting way, I think. So look, that's what we're covering. So just to recap that, we're going back over buyer group intelligence, the words that you'll be hearing from me a lot this year. Why are they important? Why should you care about it? How can you practically realign how you go to market without throwing everything that you're doing in the bin right now? That is not necessary, and anyone who's telling you that it is wrong, quite frankly. You can steer the ship in the right direction and optimize and augment. You don't need to bin and rebuild, because no one's going to do that realistically. What's happening in the industry, macro trends, economic, social, political, philosophical, without getting into shit fights about stuff. And as I said, like just what's happening in the news, what's affecting all of us, and what the hell is going on, basically. What is happening? So that's it. That's what we're covering. As I said at the start, love to have you on if you want to come on and talk about this stuff. And look, I'm excited to get back into the talking seat. So there you have it. Concise intro and overview of 2026 on the podcast. I look forward to imagining my words falling into your ears through the rest of the year. See you next time.